Hello, and welcome to another interview in my series with product leaders. In this series, I'm exploring how the role and function of product leadership has changed in recent times and learning more about how product teams work. I'm Paul Blunden, founder of UX247, and we help organizations that have a strong digital focus deliver high-performing products and services. Today, I'll be speaking with Kush Patel and finding out how he got into the product arena and learning about how he sees the changing landscape. Hi, Kush, great to meet you. For the benefit of the audience, can I ask you to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, Paul. My name is Kush. I am the product lead on the women's health team at Haleon, which is a giant consumer health company previously known as GSK Consumer Health.
Cool. And of all the people I've interviewed, you are the one I've been most interested to ask this question because I know your background, not because I know you personally, but because of being introduced and having a look. So yeah. How long have you been working in the product arena and what attracted you into it?
So I've been in product for 5 years now. And I think like most people that I know that do product kind of stumbled into it. I'm sure you hear that a lot. But I actually started life as a emergency care doctor. So I went to medical school, went to work in the NHS, and I realized a couple of things really quickly. One, that the number of people that needed care were much greater than the number of people that were able to deliver care, which anybody that's been into healthcare globally will have noticed. Two, that problem was getting worse, right? We're getting older and sicker and living longer, and actually we're not retaining the talent that we need into the healthcare service. And three, that I wasn't going to be able to fix that problem, treating patients one by one in A&E. So I was looking around for ways that I could work on the same problem because I'm massively driven by healthcare. So if I think about how do I scale what I was doing one by one, digital health, just having its moment back then in London was a natural place for me to go looking. And I joined my first digital health startup, a company called Babylon Health back then, which is basically trying to use technology and specifically artificial intelligence to scale the impact that medical expertise could have on healthcare. So yeah, that's how I got into product management, and then left them, came to where I am now, working more in the kind of self-care space, so empowering the consumer. Because, as you know, healthcare is delivered not in the 7 minutes that you see your GP, but in the other 23 and 53 minutes, 23 hours, 53 minutes outside of that. And that's kind of the journey I've been on with the team for the last 2 and a bit years.
It's a really interesting area. And I'm really interested to understand the sort of role of product in that space. Could you talk a bit more about that? And I was particularly interested in what I've been observing is the function seems to have changed quite a lot in an organization. And I wondered whether in the 5 years you've been involved, you've seen that as well.
Yeah. I think I probably haven't been in it. I've read more about the change than I might have seen being part of the transition. But I think what is very clear is that even in my time working in different organizations, there are companies that are doing product management different ways. I think when I've worked at Babylon, which is a very product engineering led organization that designs itself in a very Silicon Valley style, lots of autonomous 2 pizza teams that have a very kind of traditional product management role. So, you're this kind of servant leader that sits in the middle of a lot of bloody talented people and pushes them towards the right goal. And then I now work on a small team that has that culture, but in a much larger corporate environment that has a slightly older, maybe product culture. And it's interesting contrasting some of the differences. I think the thing that can be often unhelpful is that everyone knows that using the word product management is right, but they often use it to mean different things. So yeah, I think I've seen some of the range, but maybe not felt the transition as sharply as people that have been around a bit longer.
Gotcha. So in your role as product manager, I mean, what is that role? How does it sort of manifest where you are now?
Yeah, so it's very much, and I think there's an important distinction from the product management that I'm looking to be able to do from some of the products ownership roles that I sometimes see that can be very kind of execution focused. So I guess the three big things that I'm responsible for are the strategy of what we're doing. So both the product strategy, products and services, right? Because it's often hard to agree on what the product is. But how does the thing that we're building align with the organization or the business goals that we have? Two, once we've aligned on what it is we're actually trying to achieve, then executing along that is kind of the other bucket. Is how do I work with a team to deliver and to move closer to that goal, and execute on that strategy? And then three, the leadership element. So pulling in the right people, building the right culture, making myself useful to push our very talented team towards success. So yeah, they're kind of the three pillars. Or phrase another way, I guess it's like I feel like I'm responsible for describing what we're building and why. It's kind of the two things that are always in my mind of like what I'm constantly reminding the team of, probably to a degree that they get very irritated, but it does sink in and it just helps us make the good decisions at kind of almost all Zoom levels all the time.
Okay, that's really interesting. And I was quite interested in, do you have product owners working with you, or is that role non-existent in your organization?
So in the team that I work in, we don't have product owners. We have junior product managers, and the way that you might split the difference between us is, I guess, when you're quite a junior product manager, you're kind of told what problem you're solving and how you're going to solve it, and your job is kind of to execute. And then I think as you move up the ladder, you then are told, okay, this is the problem you're solving, and you can go and figure out how you'd like to solve it. And then I guess at this most senior level, you're working on which problems are the ones that we should be solving. I think you do a little bit of that at each stage, but that's, I think, the craft, and I think that's the journey that product managers are on and throughout this process. I've definitely met more traditional product owners inside Helium, who have a very kind of execution role, manage a backlog, execute the Agile Manifesto, run Scrum, let's say, which I think is a subsection of what I've always considered product management at large. But yeah, some differences, I think.
Yeah, that's it. That's really interesting. And you mentioned there about sort of problems. I'm building a picture of the key sort of problems and challenges product managers face. Can you talk a bit about those? I mean, what would your top three sort of things that keep you awake at night or keep you busy?
Oh, that's interesting. I think the one that I imagine keeps every product manager awake at night is prioritization. I think if you're doing, my sense is if I'm doing my job right, I'm drowning in things to do. Be that data, be that fires, be that things that could be better, be that stakeholders I could be engaging with. I think being ruthless with prioritizing not only my own time, but also the team's time. Especially now, for example, we've just gone live with a new product, and as much as the plan and design time can feel busy, once you're actually live in market and you've got so much, you're this hose pipe of information coming your way, figuring out which problems to solve and where to devote your time. I think that is one of the big ones for me. Learning to say no to stakeholders that often have different perspectives and different goals than you do, and protecting your team and their time. So I think prioritization is maybe the big one. The second one, I think, has been, I think a lot of product management is experimentation. And I think fostering an idea of experimenting, which inherently means getting stuff wrong, which I think you can get buy-in from executives all the way along to actually you showing them something that didn't work. And where your narrative there is, this is a positive outcome because we've learned early something that won't work before we spent loads of money building it out, and that's good. I think often the challenge is like building a culture where that's recognized as valuable, and making people comfortable with kind of like failing, let's say, or learning that something doesn't work, which is a good thing, and having the kind of courage and the freedom to innovate, I guess. How did you want three off me?
Yeah, well, I said three. I mean, the last one there, I mean, that just sort of unpacks a whole load of stuff because it's a challenge. But I mean, what those barriers are, do you find that a difficult sort of organizations culturally aren't ready for error making? Because I'm with you, I think it's the right way, but I know it's quite hard to swallow.
Definitely. And I think it is a fine balance. I think you can really lean into feeling like you're setting big piles of cash on fire if you're not careful. And I can really see why you get nervous CFOs and see people who are like, I need to see this return. And I think a part of the product manager's job is to build the right communication style and channel that shows and can characterize progress constantly. So even when you're getting stuff wrong, you can demonstrate why it's taking you closer to a goal that is closer to the return on investment that your stakeholders want to see. So it is a challenge, but I also think it's one of the best parts of the job. I think if you can build, if you're lucky enough to either have or build a safe place to play, and you can create psychological safety so your team feels comfortable taking bigger stabs or more shots on goal, that's when you unlock some of that magic, I think.
Yeah, and you talk then about sort of internal stakeholders and dealing with those. How important is it, in your view, involving the customer in your sort of product process?
Paramount, I'd say. I think going back to your earlier question around the kind of changes in the product management field, I think anyone that's born into the latest, the new wave of product management doesn't think in any other way than customer centricity and solving the consumer's problems and making sure that your business goals, your products and your consumer goals align nicely. And that's so well talked about now on anyone's LinkedIn page, and you read any of the Medium posts out there, you almost forget there are companies out there that don't necessarily work that way. And I've gotten to know, I think all companies on their journey towards being more customer centric, and I feel lucky to be part of the team that is helping a massive, one of the biggest consumer companies on the planet do that. Someone that is used to being incredibly far away, both in personal relationships and data from their consumer, because they sell products through a third party, and being like, you can deliver much more value and develop much more valuable propositions if you build really tight relations with your consumers and you involve them in your product discovery and delivery process. So yeah, I think paramount.
And when you talk about customer centricity, what does that mean in an organization? Is it about the data, the research, what's going on there that makes a brand or a business customer centric?
Yeah, I think for me, it's an ability to tie all of your decisions, both you as an individual, you as a team, the individuals on your team, around a clear understanding of what it will mean to at least your consumer as well as to your business, and that you can really look any trade-offs you're making in the face. And I think you do that in the ways that you described. You do that through data. If you have a product live, through analytics for what insights you can gather that way, from research, either primary or secondary. I love developing personas because they're very useful for. It's much easier to tell a story about a single person that you can then refine over time, build buy-in with your team and with your executive actually. And it's much easier for me to put myself in a person who I can name's shoes whenever I'm deciding, be that where should this button go, or should this feature even exist, or do we even need a digital channel for this proposition? All the different kind of Zoom levels. I think being reminded of who the person is you're solving for, the people you're solving for, the companies is I think really helpful.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful because I've been interviewing researchers prior to this, and I work in research. I have done for 20 odd years, although I'm not a researcher myself. But what I find talking to researchers is their view on how customer-centric brands is completely different to how product managers' views are. And I do wonder whether it's because researchers view it as, well, if they're not doing much research, they can't be customer-centric. But it feels like for product managers, customer centricity goes way beyond just carrying out some research. It's really cultural in some ways.
I think so. I think it very much is a mindset, and that mindset is one that the organization needs to engender and is reflecting the people that it hires, and then into the tools that it employs, and then the work that it does. So I think it does filter all the way down. That being said, I've worked in places that really don't know how to really get the most value out of their researchers, and I really feel for whenever I meet a UXR specialists who just they're not quite letting them fly in the way that they need to. So I think it is that combination of the qual and the quant of the what's happening and why you do need both. And I think that's why you do need research people on teams on every level.
And what are the, I mean, you mentioned there's one of the areas I'd love to explore is when brands don't do research or the researchers get frustrated. What do you think is causing that?
I think a lot of people have not had the luxury of coming across someone whose role has been user research, and as someone who's only works in companies from the beginning, where that was someone on my team that I learned an awful lot from, and whose principles, were imbued in me, and then I was able to do that for a long time on my team when I didn't have a user researcher. Not to anywhere near the standard that those guys can and the way that they think, but I think you can really see the difference of the level of insight that you can bring and how well you can tie your decisions to actual pieces of real world information, and how many things or how many efforts or experiments succeed versus fail. So I think you just build this kind of bank of insight really quickly. Whereas I think it's easy to present yourself as someone that is quite your brand, user centric or customer centric, but often when you come to deliver or you come to push something out, you learn that, oh, we actually got this a bit wrong, and then it's about examining why and how we can use research better.
Sure. Yes, that does. And research obviously is just one of the tools product managers have at their disposal. I mean, what does the toolkit look like these days?
Wow, I guess it depends what we're trying to do. I think I'm very lucky right now on the next team at Halion, because as I kind of said earlier, that we've been given the autonomy to build our own culture around research and around customer centricity broadly, and then the right people with the right mindset and then the toolkit. And I guess we've been very good at being innovative in when we've been doing 0 to 1 stuff and testing out new ideas. What are the scrappy off the shelf tools we can use that let us, put a Squarespace with a type form to get a quick understanding of who our consumers are and where the demand is, and throw a smoke test up and learn before we build out something slightly more mature. And then being able to really quickly prototype with something like a Figma. And I mean, the number of low code, no code platforms out there can get you to like a pretty scrappy MVP pretty quickly, just to answer your big assumptions and your big questions, and let you then go away and say to somebody, hey, here's the robust insights that I've got that validate the direction I want to take us in. I now need this investment for me to go and do that. So yeah, I think we've been lucky that we can put together our own toolkit, but it does definitely change depending on what stage of the life cycle we're in. Yeah.
And you mentioned, I think, that your product is using AI, but in our sort of side of the industry, generative AI is getting talked about a lot in terms of its role in research. And I wondered whether you had a view on how generative AI would affect product management, perhaps.
Wow. Yeah. This is so interesting. I think that I guess there are 2 big ways I think that it will affect product management, if I have to make 2 big buckets to talk about them. One, the job itself. In fact, I'll go back to your earlier question. A third challenge of product managers is knowing how much to keep your head above the water and looking at what's happening in the market and what tech's emerging, and how much to put your head down and get with what's in front of you. I think I wrestled with that with the LLM hype cycle that we're still very early in at the moment. And I think what will change is the job will change around us, as it will do for marketeers and people that write copy or make content. And I think the quicker that we learn to familiarize ourselves with it, and I'm sure I, like many people, have been using it as like a very smart assistant, essentially, to help me brainstorm ideas, improve my emails, write marketing copy, through to getting me recipes when I'm having a dinner party. So I think being in the process, I think, is important, and the job will change around us as new generations of PMs and the teams that we work on imbibe or take in LLMs into their workflow, which I think is already happening. And then 2, the actual propositions that we build and the context in which our propositions live will be vastly different, right? If no one, let's take a crazy example and say no one ever uses search ever again, and the whole world experienced through conversational chat, then if I'm someone that acquires users through Google Ads and I'm serving a platform that has content on it, then the context of my proposition has completely changed. So yeah, I think as has been described by many people, that we're about to see a shift quite similar to the printing press being invented. And we have no idea all the ways in which things will change. We're very early. There's loads of ways in which I think the current technology is yet to evolve, and we have to figure out how to regulate it and all kinds of interesting stuff. But yeah, I think product management, because at heart we are technologists that need to be innovative with how we deliver value, solve problems for people that can then deliver value to businesses. I think it's going to be a massive shift.
Wow. Okay, so well, let me move on a little bit from that then. I wanted to ask you about a product-related success, perhaps that you're particularly proud of, maybe that you and your team have sort of worked on or over the years.
Yeah, I mean, I can stick with the I'll stick with the AI effort for now. I think one of the challenges we've been working with the team on around consumer healthcare is that the foundation around which good healthcare or self-care is built is education. And right now, if I take my example of my mum, she lives in a world where she has a bunch of questions, can't go and see her doctor, spends a lot of time Googling to get answers to her questions on menopause and her healthy aging. And there's a lot of misinformation. She doesn't know what to buy, what to try. So we were building this proposition or figuring out how do we enable the self-care journey, and how do we build maybe a platform that can be a source of education, let's say. And then this momentous occasion last Christmas with LLMs being born, and you see how the world might change and what the context that proposition needs to evolve in. And I put a bit of a business case together to say why we, a tiny team in a company that doesn't really do any AI, should be spending any energy running experiments using LLMs just to learn what the technology is capable of and how we might operate in that space. And a very small team of us, very scrappily, used open source LM technology, added in like a knowledge base, and basically said, how do we make this thing answer questions in a way that it doesn't hallucinate as much as it might do at the moment, so it delivers some verified information. And just setting that experiment up and getting to an architecture that might work and some simple requirements was like a really fun project. I think we learned a lot by just doing. And even though from the outside looking in, like an executive is like, why have we spent any money doing that? We're not going to be that company anytime soon, or it's not, super high on the roadmap. And I think they're the kind of conversations that are really fun as a product manager, where you're like, we have to be ahead of some of this stuff and learning by doing. So I've been super proud of that work that we've been doing. It's just really interesting, and it changes every week because of the rate of change of that technology. But fascinating stuff.
Yeah, that's really fascinating, isn't it? There's so many people I speak to who are trying to do some sort of experiment with AI just to see what it can do, whether it can change. And there's differing degrees of success, but it's important, I think, that we do experiment.
Totally.
In your sector, it feels like it could be absolutely transformational.
Definitely, it definitely could. And I think of one of my favorite books that I got many years ago when I first joined, when I was working on AI for healthcare, was a book called Life 3.0. And it characterizes the kind of, it says that AI is basically this rising tide, and that things that it can accomplish is this kind of valley. They're like the bottom of the valley are things like surprisingly playing chess and doing massive calculations. And then the top of the valley is like creating subjective art, and healthcare is up here, just because it's like really high risk, quite nuanced at times. So I think you're right, it will be very transformative, especially in healthcare, especially the problem I described about scaling access to information and helping people change behavior. But the risk is so high, so it's a journey we'll all be on, I think, at pace. I'm excited to see how that happens.
Yes, well, as we're all consumers of healthcare, of course, so I think we're all excited to see it too. And finally, Kush, maybe I could ask you about your biggest learning since you started working in the product area.
Yes. Okay. I think it's a personal one to me. I think that lots of product management is sitting in ambiguity, and like being comfortable sitting in ambiguity. As a doctor, in A&E, you know, Paul comes in, chest pain, sweating, heart rate's up. My whole game is to like quickly get to an answer, figure out what you have, and start to treat you. Which kind of runs counter to how good product management works, which is you need to be comfortable sitting in the like in the problem space for a bit and looking at everything that's out there, and then back in the solution space and looking at all the ways that you might solve it. And it's tempting to like reach early for a solution and just go. But actually, I think being comfortable sitting in ambiguity and letting the people around you, your designers, your engineers, your R&D experts, feed in and tinker with an idea. And I think that is when actually the magic happens. But it's been hard for me to, you know, it's been a development goal of mine to get more comfortable in that transition of being okay with good enough and with ambiguity, rather than kind of perfection and assumed qualification. So that's been a big goal for me.
It's a great learning. I mean, I think we could all benefit from that. It's such a human thing to leap for solutions, isn't it, when there's a problem facing you, and to sort of exist, as you say, in ambiguity. That's pretty tricky.
Tough one.
Good stuff. Kush, thanks so much for your time. It's been really interesting talking to you and hearing your views, and how even in the sort of 5-6 years you've been in product, that, you know, things have changed, and your view of product management. It's, yeah, really fascinating. And yeah, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
What an interesting conversation with Kush. Great to speak to somebody who's come from the healthcare world and become a product manager in healthcare, bring a really interesting perspective. And of course, they joined the industry at a time of great change, and yeah, really refreshing views on that. And also on generative AI, which was a really unique perspective. Anyway, that was another interview in my series with product leaders, and do check out the channel to find the others. I'm Paul Blunden, founder of UX247, and we help product people, designers, and people who do research deliver high-performing products and services. You can find out more about what we do by visiting our website, that's UX247.com, or find me on LinkedIn and message me there. And better still, subscribe to this channel, and there'll be another interview coming along soon. Thanks for watching.